Let us be brutally honest about what it feels like to live in the year 2026. You wake up, you grab your phone, and you check your bank balance. That number, it never seems to go up, does it? No matter how many hours you work, no matter if you got that 3% raise, you feel like you are sinking. You walk into a coffee shop for a quick lunch. You order a sandwich and a drink. The cashier turns the screen around and it asks for a 20% tip on a $25 bill. $25 for a sandwich? You pay it, but inside, you feel a knot in your stomach. You remember when this cost $10. You remember when filling your gas tank did not feel like a luxury. Then there is the mail. The credit card statement arrives. You look at the interest charge. It is punishing. You are paying for groceries you ate last month with interest rates that look like they belong to a loan shark, not a bank. You look at the housing market, and it feels like a private club that revoked your membership. The American dream of owning a home, a car, and having a savings account in 2026, it feels like a hallucination. And the worst part? You turn on the news, and the politicians in suits tell you the economy is resilient. They talk about a soft landing. They show you charts saying unemployment is low, but you know the truth. You feel it in your bones. The system feels broken. The game feels rigged. You are not crazy, and you are not alone. Millions of people are silently screaming the exact same thing. I am working harder than ever, so why am I getting poorer? Here is the answer they will not tell you on the evening news. We are not just in a rough patch. We are at the mathematical limit of a massive 80-year financial cycle. We are standing on the edge of a cliff that the legendary investor Ray Dalio calls the long-term debt cycle deleveraging. Ray Dalio saw the 2008 crash coming when Wall Street was still partying. He understands the machine, and for the next 30 minutes, we are going to ignore the politicians and the talking heads. We are going to look at the cold, hard mechanics of why you feel broke. We are going to explain why this pain was inevitable, why the system is resetting, and most importantly, how you can stop being a victim of the machine and start protecting what is yours. Turn off the distractions. This is the explanation you have been waiting for. To understand the global economy, we cannot start with trillion-dollar deficits or complex banking regulations. That is too big. We have to start small. We have to start with you. We have to start with the simplest building block of the economic machine, the transaction. The economy, for all its complexity, is really just the sum total of billions and billions of transactions happening every single day. Every time you buy a morning coffee, you create a transaction. Every time you pay your rent, you create a transaction. Every time a business buys software or a government buys a fighter jet, it is a transaction. A transaction is a simple exchange. A buyer gives money or credit to a seller. In exchange, the seller gives goods, services, or financial assets. That is it. That is the DNA of the economy. If you understand this one simple exchange, you can understand everything else. But here is where the first great illusion lies, and this is critical for understanding 2026. In a transaction, you can pay with two things. You can pay with money, or you can pay with credit. To you, standing at the checkout counter, they feel exactly the same. You swipe a debit card, or you swipe a credit card, the machine beeps, you walk away with your goods. But underneath the surface, these two actions are fundamentally, violently different. Money is what settles a transaction. If you pay with cash, or with money directly from your checking account, the deal is done. You have the goods, the seller has the value. There is no lingering connection between you. The transaction is closed. Credit is different. When you pay with credit, you are not settling the transaction. You are opening a tab. You are making a promise. You are saying to the seller and to the bank, I promise to pay you this value in the future. In that exact moment, something magical and dangerous happens. You create an asset and a liability out of thin air. To the lender, your promise is an asset. They count it as wealth. To you, it is a liability. It is a debt. Why does this distinction matter? Because the vast majority of what we call money in the economy today is not actually money. It is credit. It is promises. Let me give you a metaphor to visualize the danger we are in. Imagine the entire United States economy is a gigantic iceberg floating in the freezing ocean. The tip of the iceberg, the white part you can see glistening above the water, That is real money. That is the physical cash and the reserves banks actually hold. In 2026, that amount is roughly $2.5 trillion. But now, look underwater. Look at the massive, dark, submerged mountain of ice that is holding everything up. That is credit. That is debt. That is the total accumulated pile of promises to pay. Mortgages, car loans, credit card balances, corporate bonds, government treasuries. Do you know how big that underwater mountain is today? It is estimated to be nearly $100 trillion. Let that sink in. $2.5 trillion of real money. $100 trillion of promises. The ratio is 1 to 40. The entire system is floating on confidence. As long as everyone believes the promises will be kept, the machine hums along. We feel rich, we spend freely. But if that confidence cracks, if people start demanding real money for their promises, we realize there isn't enough money to go around. The iceberg flips. This reliance on credit is what drives the economy, but it is also what creates cycles. When you borrow, you are able to spend more than you earn. And remember the golden rule of economics. One person's spending is another person's income. If you borrow money to renovate your house, the contractor earns more money. Because he earns more, he can borrow more. He goes out and buys a new truck, the car dealership earns more money. It is a beautiful upward spiral. We call this growth, but there is a dark side. By borrowing, you are pulling spending forward. You are consuming today what you have not yet earned. You are effectively borrowing from your future self. And your future self is going to have to spend less than they earn to pay it back. This creates a cycle, a period of growth followed inevitably by a period of austerity. It is mechanical. It is unavoidable. And right now, we are dealing with the consequences of decades of borrowing from our future. The bill has arrived. Now that we understand the building blocks, let us look at the first major rhythm of the economy. Ray Dalio calls this the short-term debt cycle. You have lived through several of these in your lifetime. They typically last about 5 to 8 years. We often call them the business cycle, or simply the boom and bust. To understand this cycle, I want you to imagine the economy as a party, a really great, loud, expensive party. In this analogy, the central bank, which in the United States is the Federal Reserve, plays the role of the bartender. The bartender has a very specific job. He controls the flow of alcohol. In the economy, the alcohol is credit. It is the fuel that makes the party wild. At the beginning of the cycle, the economy is sluggish. Maybe it is recovering from a recession. The mood is low. So the bartender wants to get things moving. He lowers the price of the drinks. In economic terms, they lower interest rates. When interest rates are low, borrowing is cheap. The monthly payment on a mortgage is low. The cost for a business to finance a new factory is low. So what happens? People start drinking. They start borrowing. Since credit is cheap, you decide to buy that house. A business decides to expand. People pull out their credit cards to buy new TVs. Spending increases. And because your spending is my income goes up. I feel confident. I borrow more. I spend more. The music gets louder. The lights get brighter. Asset prices, like stocks and real estate, start to go up because everyone is buying. We feel wealthy. This is the boom. This is the expansion phase. We saw a massive version of this party from 2010 all the way to 2021. Interest rates were pinned near zero. Money was free. The party was raging. Everyone felt like a genius investor. But here is the problem with parties fueled by alcohol or economies fueled by credit. We don't know when to stop. As spending increases, it eventually starts to grow faster than the production of actual goods and services. We have too much money chasing too few goods. When this happens, prices rise. We call this inflation. Inflation is the sign that the party is getting out of hand. It is the sound of glass breaking on the dance floor. It is the fights breaking out in the corner. If the bartender lets this go on, the currency will lose all its value and the party will turn into a riot. So, the responsible bartender has to step in. He has to take away the punch bowl. He has to raise the price of the drinks. The central bank raises interest rates. We saw this happen violently in 2022 and 2023. The Fed raised rates faster than they had in 40 years. Suddenly, the drinks are expensive. The monthly payment on that new house doubles. The interest on your credit card debt jumps to 25%. The cost of doing business skyrockets. Naturally, people stop borrowing. They stop drinking. And because they have debt from the party, they have to use their income to pay off the debt instead of spending it. Spending slows down. And because one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop. The economy cools off. Asset prices fall. The music stops. The lights come on. This is the recession. This is the hangover. This is the painful part of the cycle. Businesses cut costs, they lay off workers, unemployment rises. It feels terrible. But this hangover is necessary. It clears out the excesses of the party. It brings prices back down. It stabilizes the system. Eventually, when the recession gets bad enough and inflation has cooled down, the bartender looks around. He sees everyone sitting quietly, nursing their headaches. He decides it is time to get things moving again. He lowers the price of the drinks, he lowers interest rates, and the whole cycle begins again. Boom, bust, recovery, boom, bust, recovery. This mechanical rhythm repeats every 5 to 8 years. But there is a secret trap hidden inside this cycle. A trap that most people do not see until it is too late. Human nature. We love the party. We hate the hangover. Politicians love the boom. They hate the recession. So every time the central bank tries to cool things down, politicians and the public scream for them to ease up. They want the punch bowl back. As a result, each time the cycle restarts, we never quite pay off all the debt from the previous party. We just add to it. Over decades, this accumulation of debt creates a much bigger, much scarier problem. The hangover doesn't just go away with a cup of coffee and some aspirin. It turns into a chronic illness. The short-term cycles stack on top of each other to form the long-term debt cycle, and that is the beast we are facing today. If the short-term cycle is a hangover, the long-term debt cycle is a life-threatening condition. This cycle takes 75 to 100 years to play out. Because it spans an entire human lifetime, most people do not recognize it when it happens. They just think, this is how the world works. But history shows us the pattern is undeniable. Let us look at the timeline. The last time the system reset was around 1945. We are now 81 years into this cycle. We are in the late stages, we are in the danger zone. Here is how the supercycle works. For decades, debts rise faster than incomes, but for a long time, nobody worries. In fact, people feel incredibly wealthy. Why? Because as credit expands, asset prices soar. Imagine you bought a house in 1990 for $100,000. In 2005, it is worth $300,000. In 2020, it is worth $600,000. You feel rich. You look at that equity and you think, I am a genius. Lenders look at you and say, wow, you have great collateral. Here, borrow more money. So you borrow against your house to buy a car. You use margin to buy stocks. You leverage up. Everyone leverages up. The debt burden, which is the ratio of debt to income, climbs higher and higher. But here is the magic trick that kept the game going for 40 years. Interest rates kept falling. From 1981 until 2021, the general trend of interest rates was down, down, down. It went from 18% all the way to 0. This allowed everyone to carry a mountain of debt that would otherwise be crushing. Even though the pile of debt was getting bigger, the cost to service that debt was getting cheaper. It was the perfect illusion. But in 2022, the trend broke. The music stopped. Inflation forced rates up. And suddenly, the math stopped working. We hit the ceiling. This happened in 1929. It happened in Japan in 1989. And it happened globally in 2008. But in 2008, we did not fix the problem. We put a massive Band-Aid on it, we printed more money, and kicked the can down the road. Now, in 2026, we have run out of road. The can has hit a wall. The debt burdens are higher than ever. The iceberg is massive, and interest rates can no longer be lowered to 0 to save the day because inflation is lurking in the shadows. The central banks are trapped. If they lower rates to help the economy, inflation roars back. If they keep rates high to fight inflation, the debt burden crushes everyone. This is the tipping point. This is when the bubble bursts for real. We enter a phase called deleveraging. This is not a normal recession. In a normal recession, the Fed cuts rates and we recover. In a deleveraging, The Fed cannot cut rates enough because the debt is simply too big. Borrowers are drowning. Lenders stop lending because they are scared they will never get paid back. The flow of credit stops. The economy seizes up. Imagine you have maxed out 10 credit cards to pay the interest on 10 other credit cards. And then one day the bank calls and says, no more. You cannot borrow another dime. And you cannot pay what you owe. That is where the global economy finds itself. We are staring at a massive, necessary correction. The machine needs to reset. The debt has to come down. The only question remaining is, will it be an ugly, chaotic crash? Or can the policymakers engineer a controlled demolition? Will it be an ugly deleveraging or a beautiful deleveraging? When debt gets too high, it has to come down. There is no magic trick to make it disappear without consequences. Ray Dalio identifies 4, and only 4, ways that a society can reduce its debt burden. These are the 4 levers that policymakers can pull. And living in 2026, you need to watch closely. You need to be a hawk. You need to see which levers your government is pulling, because each one affects your wallet, your savings, and your future in a drastically different way. Lever number 1 is austerity. This is the tighten your belt approach. People cut spending, businesses cut costs, governments cut services. The idea is simple: stop borrowing and pay down the debt. It sounds responsible. It sounds like what a prudent family would do. But for a national economy, austerity is disastrous. Remember the golden rule? One person's spending is another person's income. If everyone stops spending at the same time to pay off debt, incomes crash. And if incomes crash faster than debts are paid off, the debt burden actually gets worse. You owe the same amount, but you are earning less. Austerity is painful. It leads to deep depressions. It leads to social unrest. Voters hate it. Politicians hate it. So, while you will hear talk of budget cuts, austerity is rarely the main solution. Lever number 2 is debt defaults and restructuring. This is the I cannot pay approach. Borrowers simply default. They walk away from their houses. Companies go bankrupt. When this happens, the banks panic. Remember, your debt is the bank's asset. When you default, the bank's asset vanishes. People realize the bank doesn't have their money. They rush to withdraw. This is a bank run. To stop the bleeding, debts have to be restructured. Lenders sit down with borrowers and say, okay, you can't pay me 100%, pay me 50%. Or pay me over 30 years instead of 10. Lenders agree because getting something is better than getting nothing. This reduces the debt, but it creates a massive deflationary shock. Wealth evaporates. The illusion of the iceberg shattering. Lever number 3 is wealth redistribution. This is the Robin Hood approach. In a depression, tax revenues collapse because incomes are down. But government spending must skyrocket to support the unemployed and stimulate the economy. The budget deficit explodes. To fill the hole, the government raises taxes on the wealthy. They try to move money from the haves to the have-nots. We are seeing this right now in 2026, aren't we? The calls for wealth taxes, the strikes, the populism, the anger between the rich and the poor. This social tension is a classic symptom of the long-term debt cycle. If it gets too intense, it can lead to political extremism or even revolution. Lever number 4 is printing money. This is the lever that politicians and central bankers love the most. It is the path of least resistance. When interest rates are already at 0, or when the pain of austerity is too high, the central bank does something magical and terrifying. They create money out of thin air. They use this newly created money to buy financial assets and government bonds. This pumps cash directly into the system. It raises asset prices. It makes people feel wealthier. But unlike the first 3 ways, which are deflationary, meaning prices go down, printing money is inflationary, meaning prices go up. This is exactly what happened during the pandemic. We saw the biggest money printing experiment in human history. Governments flooded the world with liquidity to prevent a collapse. It worked in the short term. It saved us from a depression. But it ignited the inflation fire that we are still fighting today. So, what is the end game? The holy grail of economics is what Ray Dalio calls a beautiful deleveraging. A beautiful deleveraging is a balancing act. It is a tightrope walk in a hurricane. Policymakers try to balance the 4 levers perfectly. They print just enough money to stimulate growth and offset the pain of default and austerity, but not so much that they cause hyperinflation. They try to keep income growth slightly higher than the interest rate on the debt. If they get the balance right, debts slowly go down relative to income. The economy grows slowly but surely, inflation stays manageable, social stability is maintained. But if they get it wrong, if they print too much money, like Germany did in the 1920s or Zimbabwe did later, the currency collapses. Money becomes toilet paper. Life savings are wiped out in a week. If they print too little, the depression drags on for a decade. In 2026, the tightrope is thinner than ever. The wind is blowing hard, and the people walking the rope seem to be shaking. So, let us bring all this theory crashing into your reality. Let us talk about why you feel the way you do right now. Why does the economy feel so broken in 2026? We are living in the hangover phase of the massive intervention from the early 2020s. When the pandemic hit, governments pulled lever number 4, printing money harder than they ever have in history. They flooded the engine with fuel. It prevented the machine from seizing up, but it overheated the engine to a critical degree. That printed money caused the massive inflation spike of 2022 and 2023. To put out that fire, central banks had to slam on the brakes. They raised interest rates faster and higher than we have seen in decades. Now, we have the worst of both worlds. We have the massive debt load from the long-term cycle colliding with the high interest rates needed to fight the inflation. This is the squeeze. For you, the individual, the squeeze is terrifying. Your wages might have crept up a little, but the cost of servicing your debt has exploded. Mortgage rates are high, freezing the housing market. You cannot sell, you cannot buy. Car loans are expensive. Credit card interest is punishing, turning small balances into lifetime sentences. At the same time, the cost of goods remains high because that printed money is still circulating in the system. The price of a sandwich has stabilized, but it's stabilized at $20, not $10. We are in the volatile transition period. The policymakers are desperately trying to engineer a soft landing, a beautiful deleveraging, but the margin for error is zero. The deficits are growing. The interest payment on the national debt is skyrocketing. This is why you feel the uncertainty. It is not just in your head. The tectonic plates of the global economy are shifting. The era of easy money, of growth at all costs, is over. The era of 0% interest rates is likely gone for a generation. We are in an era of tightening, of reckoning. In this environment, the old rules of money do not work. Buy and hold might not work if we enter a lost decade. Leverage up to get rich is financial suicide in a high rate environment. Cash flow is no longer just a metric, it is survival. Debt is no longer a tool, it is a weapon pointed at your financial future. You need to stop acting like it is 2019. The rules have changed. The machine has shifted gears. And if you do not adjust your strategy, you will get crushed. Enough theory. Let us talk action. You cannot control the Federal Reserve. You cannot control the government deficit. But you can control your own microeconomy. Based on Ray Dalio's framework and the specific dangers of 2026, here is your battle plan. Here is how you protect yourself and your family. Strategy 1, the cash shield. For a long time, Ray Dalio famously said, cash is trash. And he was right. When they were printing money like crazy and assets were soaring, holding cash was a guaranteed way to lose value. But in 2026, in a deleveraging phase with high interest rates, cash changes its character. If you can get a guaranteed 4 or 5% return on your cash in a high yield savings account or short-term treasury bills, cash is no longer trash. It is a shield. It is a bunker. In a volatile world where stocks can crash and real estate can freeze, liquidity is power. Having 6 months to a year of expenses in liquid cash gives you options. It prevents you from becoming a forced seller. It means you do not have to sell your home or your stocks at the bottom just to buy groceries. Prioritize building this shield. Strategy 2, attack the shark. I want you to visualize your variable rate debt as a shark swimming in your living room. Credit cards, adjustable rate mortgages, personal loans. In a low rate world, the shark was asleep. In a high rate world, the shark is in a feeding frenzy. It is eating your future alive. The math of compound interest at 25% is brutal. Your number one investment priority is not buying the next hot stock. It is killing the shark. Pay down your high interest debt aggressively. A guaranteed 20% return by paying off a credit card is better than any speculative gain you will find in the market. Deleverage your own personal balance sheet before the market forces you to. Be ruthless. Strategy 3, insurance against disaster. We know that eventually, faced with the pain of a depression, governments almost always choose to print money. It is the path of least resistance. This devalues the currency. To protect against this, you need hard assets that cannot be printed. Gold is the classic insurance policy. It has held value for thousands of years. It is a hedge against chaos. When paper money burns, gold shines. And in the 21st century, we have to talk about digital assets. Bitcoin. Many investors now view Bitcoin as digital gold. It has a fixed supply, no central bank can print more of it. While it is volatile in the short term, in the long-term debt cycle, it represents a technological hedge against currency debasement. You do not need to bet the farm, but having a small allocation to these hard assets is like buying fire insurance for your house. You hope you never need it, but if the house catches fire, you will be glad you have it. Strategy 4, the ultimate hedge. Productivity. Remember the very first force Dalio talked about? Productivity growth. In the long run, this is the only thing that matters. The best investment you can make in a deleveraging environment is in your own ability to earn. Skills, education, efficiency, health. If the economy contracts, who keeps their job? The most productive employee. If businesses fail, who starts the next one? The most capable entrepreneur. Do not rely on asset inflation to make you rich anymore. That game is paused. Rely on your ability to generate value. Learn AI tools, learn financial management, learn leadership. Your human capital is the one asset that cannot be inflated away or defaulted on. As we wrap up this deep dive into the churning gears of the economic machine, I want to leave you with Ray Dalio's 3 rules of thumb. These are simple, timeless, and if you tattoo them onto your financial brain, you will navigate any storm. Rule number 1, do not have debt rise faster than income. It is seductive to borrow when times are good. It feels like free money, but debt is a cruel master. Eventually, the burden will become heavier than the joy it bought you. Treat debt like a loaded gun. Useful if handled with extreme care and respect, deadly if treated casually. In 2026, try to have no bad debt at all. Rule number 2, do not have income rise faster than productivity. This might sound counterintuitive. Who doesn't want to raise? But if you are paid more than you produce, you eventually become uncompetitive. If your business charges more than the value it delivers, customers will leave. Whether you are a business or an employee, you must ensure that the value you create justifies the income you receive. If you become too expensive, the machine will eventually replace you. Rule number 3, do all that you can to raise your productivity. In the short run, the debt cycles toss us around like a ship in a storm. It feels like luck. It feels like chaos. But in the long run, productivity is the engine that drives us forward. It is the only thing that creates real, lasting wealth. It is the only thing that lifts standards of living. Focus on what you can control, work smarter, learn faster, adapt quicker. The year 2026 is a challenging time. The gears of the economic machine are grinding loud and hard. The icebergs are all around us. But by understanding how the machine works, you stop being a victim of it. You stop looking at the news with confusion and fear and start seeing it as a predictable sequence of events. You can see the cycles. You can see the deleveraging, and most importantly, you can position yourself not just to survive, but to prosper. While others are panicking, you will be prepared. While others are drowning in debt, you will be building your ark. Thank you for watching this deep dive on FinGraphy. We know this was dense, but we believe you are smart enough to handle the truth. If you found this explanation valuable, please share it with someone who is struggling to understand the current economy. Knowledge is the only asset that compounds infinitely. Stay educated, stay productive, and I will see you in the next video.